Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know, from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars, topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
Hello and thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Isiah. In today's podcast, we'll talk about the Bucks losing without Giannis. We'll also see two teams with big win streaks finally catch an L. Zion had himself a career night in his most recent game, so we'll visit that. We'll see how D'Lo's debut went as a new member of the Timberwolves. We'll do a quick injury update on Damian Lillard and what it could mean for Devin Booker before ending the show with some predictions on the last games before All-Star Weekend, as well as predictions for games and events during the All-Star break. Now, like I mentioned before, the Milwaukee Bucks finally lost a game. They are the best team in the league, without a doubt, and they were without their best player in Giannis. He's averaging 30 points, 13.5 rebounds, and 5.8 assists, so obviously, taking that out of the lineup is going to hurt your team a lot, but a team that's only lost 7 games on the year and are 4-0 without him can potentially find a way to win. The reason why he's not playing in this game is he just had a child. Congratulations to Giannis Antetokounmpo for that. Liam Charles Antetokounmpo, his very first kid. So, big milestone for him. A great happy moment in his life, so it's very obvious why he's not with the team at this time. The Milwaukee Bucks coming off a win against the Kings, and like I mentioned, they're 4-0 without him, so going up against a Pacers team that was on a season-high 6-game losing streak and have been completely struggling, you feel like you could probably sneak away and win a game without Giannis. The Pacers, like I said, on a 6-game losing streak. To start that losing streak, they lost against the Knicks, which obviously isn't a great team in the Eastern Conference. Their most recent loss was to the Brooklyn Nets, another iffy team in the East who has been playing better as of late, but still. But other than that, they did have some pretty tough games in between, facing the Raptors twice, the Mavericks, the Pelicans. So on the 6-game skid, they haven't had the easiest schedule other than 2 games where they could have gone the other way. During this time of their losing streaks, they lost to the Raptors and blew a 19-point lead. And in this game, something similar almost happened, but a little bit of foreshadowing, it doesn't. Indiana had a really good first half in this game, scoring the ball 34 points in each of the first 2 quarters. They had a 68-45 lead going into halftime. So it's looking real good. Their biggest lead being 25 at one point. Then, in the third, they just couldn't buy a bucket. They only managed 14 points on 25% shooting from the field and 20% from three-point land. So it looked like maybe they were about to give up another big lead and continue this losing streak that they had been on. So it was very important for them to come out aggressively in the fourth quarter and make sure that doesn't happen. At the end of the third, the Bucks looked to continue pushing their comeback, but the Pacers scored 6 unanswered to start the fourth, that good start I was talking about. They started to gain a little more breathing room. With 8 minutes and 18 seconds to go, it was 90-86, and the Pacers, mostly led by Brogdon, went on a 10-0 run to extend their lead to 14 and really start to close out this game. So thankfully for the Pacers, they could, breathe a sigh of relief that they won this game. They got their 6-game skid out of the way. Didn't blow this game, because if they had, it would have been real bad for them and real bad for their locker room. 6-game skid, 25-point lead, blowing that to a 7-game losing streak. Going into All-Star break would have been tough, but they end up winning this game 118-111. Brogdon in the fourth was Brogdon in the clutch. He had 10 points, he had 5 rebounds. He was 4 of 4 from the line when they needed him to be clutch at the free throw line. And so it was a really good transition for him, kind of helped him turn the page. Because he didn't help, but in the game against Toronto where they blew that 19-point lead, he kind of had moments where he turned the ball over too much, kind of gave that game away. Had 6 turnovers in it. But in this game, he was the reason that they held on for the win, so it's definitely a good way for him to turn the page and for the Pacers to erase their 6-game losing streak. Milwaukee also didn't have Korver or Hill in this game due to injuries, and so now their 5-game win streak is over. And on the other side, the Pacers' 6-game losing streak is over. DiVincenzo off the bench for the Bucks led in scoring with 19 points and 8 rebounds. Middleton, the second guy behind Giannis usually, scored 17 points, had 5 rebounds, 5 assists on 6 of 17 shooting. This is your next big contract guy, your next go-to guy other than Giannis. And when Giannis isn't in, I expect him to be the one to really carry the load. So it's kind of disappointing to see this little bit of outpouring of scoring from him. DiVincenzo being the one coming off the bench, being the leading scorer, is not what you want, especially when your star player is not playing. And then Bledsoe as well, another person that Milwaukee probably would turn to, was 4 of 11 from the field. Had 15 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists, so he did make up in other aspects. But the two of them, between Bledsoe and Middleton, they combined for 9 turnovers. Those are your 2 top players when Giannis is not in, and to see those two play not poorly per se, but not as efficiently as you would expect them to, is disappointing to see for them, for sure. Sterling Brown kind of brought a bright spot off the bench. He had 14 points and 8 rebounds. Ilyasova had 12, and Lopez, he had 12 points, 4 rebounds, and 3 assists, but he also had 4 turnovers. So your other big piece without Giannis, and making that big 3 with him, Bledsoe, and Middleton, they combined for 13 turnovers, which is really tough to see. Good news for Bucks. The only good news for them is they extend their streak of scoring 100 points or more in a game to 78 games. And that's tied for the 6th longest streak in NBA history. Also good news, they're still up 6.5 games on second-place Raptors. Giannis will be back in the next game, and that next game is in 8 days. So they have a lot of time to recompress. They're not even worried about this loss. It's just 1 loss. Only have 8 on the season, so it's not something to freak out about for sure. The Pacers, on the other hand, this was a big win for them. Warren, he had 35 points and 7 rebounds with 4 steals. So he went off, played a great game in his return from injury. Brogdon, he had 17 points, 5 rebounds, and a career-high 13 assists. And so he was really pulling the strings, playing really well in this game. Sabonis had 15 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists. Miles Turner had 14 points, 10 rebounds, 2 blocks. And Oladipo kind of starting to get back to his efficient way. He didn't play to the best of his ability yet. He still hasn't reached that. Obviously, being out for a year, it's going to take him some time. But the fact that he was very efficient in this game, got to start the game as well, I think was good for him. He was 5 or 7 from the field, had 13 points, 3 rebounds, and 4 assists. So little by little, he's starting to find himself back on the court. Pacers are still in 6th place. They're 2 back from the Sixers in 5th and 8 games out of 2nd now. The other best team in the NBA, kind of transitioning here, had a tough game of their own. The Lakers were up against the Nuggets, but thankfully for them, they had their big stars, unlike the Bucks, who were without Giannis. And the Lakers would need both of them because they played extremely well in this one. These two teams, 1 and 2 in the West, talking about the Lakers and the Nuggets. So a chance for the Nuggets to kind of cut that lead that the Lakers have in terms of the standings. It was a tough game between the two of them. The Nuggets started off on the right note, outscoring the Lakers 31-23 in the first quarter. But then the Lakers' offense kind of caught its rhythm and shot 16 of 24 from the field to take a 61-55 lead heading into halftime. And then from here, the start of the second half was very similar to the start of the first, with the Nuggets outscoring the Lakers 32-23 to regain the lead 87-84 heading into the final quarter. This one would be close and go down to the final buzzer, with the Lakers generally having the lead down the stretch. Anthony Davis and LeBron really being at the forefront of every offensive attempt. And then with 23.9 seconds remaining, Harris sidestepped Avery Bradley and drove into the lane. He jumped into the body of KCP, who did well to go straight up, and Harris had to have great body control, keep his composure while hanging in the air for a really tough finish for 2 points that tied the game at 111. LeBron had the opportunity to end the game with the last possession going 1v1 against Torrey Craig. He drove to his left and pulled up, kind of faded away from the elbow, and his shot hit back iron, so this one would go to overtime. The turning point for me was when Denver had the opportunity to go 4v2 the other way with the score still tied, but Grant threw the ball forward, trying to hit Murray in stride, but honestly, it was just a terrible pass, too far ahead of him, and it was easily intercepted by KCP. And so a fast break turns into a transition bucket for the Lakers. It ended up being a three-pointer from Anthony Davis, and so instead of going up a few points, you're down 3 all of a sudden. Harris, though, would respond with a 3 of his own, but then immediately after that, AD hit another 3. And from there, Denver's offense went quiet, and the Lakers held on to win 120-116 in this one. There were 9 points total for LA in overtime, and 7 of them came from Anthony Davis. So he really took over when it mattered most. The Lakers improved their NBA best road record to 23-5. So they are a formidable opponent on the road. And not to mention, that's also their 17th consecutive road win against Western Conference teams, which is an NBA record. So not only are they beating teams on the road, they're beating their Western Conference opponents that they're battling, for the top spot in the West with, and they're beating them on the road consistently, 17 games in a row. So they're proving that not only are they a great team, but even if you see them in a 7-game series, your home court advantage might not matter because of how good they are away from home. On the flip side, Jokic kind of was in foul trouble a lot of this game, and he had some key turnovers down the stretch that, really hindered the Nuggets' ability to hold on and try and win this game. He even passed up an open three-pointer that ended up turning the ball over late in the game, so he could have had an opportunity to shoot it, tie up the game, but obviously it went the other way. LeBron James in this one, though, is the biggest headline. He tied for an NBA lead. He tied the NBA lead with triple-doubles this season at 12, and he's tied with Luka Doncic right now. He has 32 points, 12 rebounds, 14 assists in this game. So he did literally everything. Anthony Davis as well went off. 33 points, 10 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 rebounds, and 2 blocks. I mean, just these two together are an absolute crazy tandem, probably the best duo in the NBA. I mean, this season, Anthony Davis is averaging 26.5 points, LeBron James averaging 24.8. Anthony Davis shooting 52%, and LeBron shooting 49%. Anthony Davis has 9.2 rebounds per game, and LeBron has 7.7. And then Anthony Davis has 2.4 blocks per game, which is third in the NBA. And LeBron James is leading the league in assists with 10.7. So their stats speak for themselves. They are going off this year. And Western Conference teams should be afraid. Dwight Howard had 14 points, 11 rebounds. Caruso had 10 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists. And then Avery Bradley had 10 points. Jamal Murray on the other side, he had 32 points, 3 rebounds, 10 assists, so he got a double-double in this one. Obviously outshined by the Lakers duo, though. Jokic had 26 points, 11 rebounds, 6 assists, 3 steals, and a block. So he was stuffing the stats, but it just wasn't enough. Got a double-double in his own right. And then Grant had 15 points, 7 rebounds. Nuggets had a 4-game win streak during this time, but now it's snapped, obviously, with this loss, and now they're 4 games back from the Los Angeles Lakers. They're not the only team, though, that had their win streak snapped. When we come back, we'll talk about the 2 best win streaks in the NBA ending. Stay with us.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. We just talked about how the Milwaukee Bucks finally lost the game. They were without a couple key players in Giannis Antetokounmpo, George Hill, also Kyle Korver. And they were going up against a wounded Pacers team that had been on a 6-game skid, so they were having that extra motivation to go out and end that. And thankfully for them, they did. And then another team on the flip side in the Los Angeles Lakers, the best team in the West, they were in a tight contest as well against the Denver Nuggets, but they were able to hold on, took it to OT, and from there, Anthony Davis took over. And Anthony Davis and LeBron James playing incredible basketball this season. The Nuggets had a 4-game win streak that ended up getting snapped, and so that segues us into the next segment where we talk about a couple teams that lost their big win streaks, the 2 longest win streaks in the NBA at the time. And on Tuesday night is where we're going to start. The Celtics took on the Houston Rockets, and they have a 7-game win streak at this time. Houston, on the other hand, were coming off a tough loss to the Jazz, where Bogdanovich hit a crazy game winner. We talked about it last podcast. And then Rockets, just as a reminder, they traded Capella, so they're going small ball. And thinking about it more over the last couple of days, I really think that it suits them, just because they have James Harden and Russell Westbrook, and without a big kind of blocking up the post, it gives them a lot more room to stretch out the floor, and they're both very good cutters, very good driving players going to the basket. So opening up that lane, I think it is a good look for them and definitely could be useful for their offense. Both proved very effective in this game. I thought it was a great matchup between the Rockets and the Celtics. It's 2 big powerhouses in the Western and the Eastern Conference, respectively. Boston had control in this game going into half, taking a 49-47 lead. But neither team were really shooting the ball well, especially Houston, who was shooting 34.1% from the field and 26.9% from three-point land. But then in the third quarter, James Harden caught fire. He was 3 for 6 from downtown, and he also just kept getting himself to the line. He was 8 for 9 from the line, and he had 19 points in this quarter alone. Westbrook also added 8 in this quarter on 3 of 4 shooting to go up 7 heading into the fourth quarter. The Celtics pushed for the comeback and got as close as 96-94, but Houston really used the line in this game to extend out their lead, and Boston could never recover. The final score would end up being 116-105. The Houston Rockets came out victorious. Boston shot 20 of 25 from the line. And the reason I say that is because in comparison, the Houston Rockets shot 37 for 42 from the line. They shot at the line 42 times. That's ridiculous. And the main player that was there, guess who? James Harden, of course. He was 17 of 18 from the line, so 17 of his points from the free throw line. So guess how many points he had in this one? He had 42 points with 8 rebounds and 7 assists. Big number that stands out to me, though, he had 6 turnovers, so that's a little rough on him. But 42 points, 17 coming from the line. I mean, whether or not you like seeing it, he gets it done. And if that's the way he's going to get some points, he's going to use that to his advantage. And clearly he did, and it worked out for him. Russell Westbrook had 36 points, 10 rebounds, 5 assists, really stuffing the stats, 2 steals, and he had 4 turnovers himself. So between the two of them, they turned the ball over 10 times. So it's not necessarily pretty, but they got the job done. And Westbrook lately has been absolutely on fire. he's usually the one with the more of the outpouring of scoring as of late, with James Harden kind of, hitting a little cooler section of points for him. But Russell Westbrook, on the other hand, last 10 games, he's averaged 34.5 points per game, 7.5 assists, 8.5 rebounds, shooting the ball 53.7% in 38 minutes. Those are great numbers for Russell Westbrook. If he can consistently shoot the ball 53.7% from the field, that'd be insane. And I think it just stems down to him choosing better shots instead of being so careless with his shooting sometimes and careless with the basketball at times, because he decides to shoot some crazy shots sometimes, just inefficient choices. So I think when he calms himself down and really chooses the right shot and the best shot for the team, he starts knocking him down a little more. Daniel House Jr. in this one had 17 points and 9 rebounds. Covington had 12 points, 7 rebounds, 3 steals, and 4 blocks. So he was really getting it done on the defensive end on a night where he wasn't shooting the ball really well, which is definitely what the Rockets are going to need, especially now that they don't have a true shot blocker getting rid of Capella. The Celtics, on the other hand, they struggled a little bit more. Gordon Hayward had 20 points, 8 rebounds, and 6 assists to lead the team in points at only 20 points. Jaylen Brown had 19 points, 3 rebounds, but he himself had 5 turnovers. Tatum, he shot 33% from the field, so he struggled shooting the ball. Only had 15 points. He did have 9 boards, 4 assists, and 4 steals. But shooting 33% from the field when you're one of the top scorers on the team is definitely rough for the team to try, and deal with, especially since Kemba as well shot really poorly in this one. He shot 30% from the field. He scored 14 points. He did add 4 rebounds and 4 assists, but it just wasn't enough. The Rockets' star power completely outshined the Celtics' star power, and it really just shows what the Houston Rockets can do. If this duo between Russell Westbrook and James Harden can be consistent in terms of their outpouring of scoring, and the fact that both of them can stuff the stats, they could be a really dangerous team. But it just hasn't been shown consistently enough for people to really buy into what they're doing. But being a team like the Boston Celtics is a good way to make people believers. The Celtics, like we talked about, lose their win streak of 7 games. But the best win streak in the NBA were with the Raptors at 15 games. And spoiler alert, that streak ends too. The Raptors would be going up against the Nets, who lost to the Raptors just 4 nights ago by just 1 measly point. So obviously, by losing by just 1 point, they're going to come out hungry, and they're going to want to get some redemption, especially since they were on the road and they felt they could steal one. They didn't have Kyrie Irving in this one with knee soreness, so it really makes me wonder, is this guy just injury prone? Because I feel like he is. He's only had one true healthy season, and that was the year he won an NBA championship. But other than that, I feel like a lot of injuries have plagued his career. Luckily for him, though, the Brooklyn Nets have been playing pretty well without him. In this game in particular, it was very back and forth early on, but it was the Nets who would eventually seize control. Their lead was 23-19 after 1, and then they ballooned that to 52-40 going into the second half. Now, during this run of their 15-game win streak for the Toronto Raptors, they only trailed at half 5 times. Also, the Raptors' 40 points at half in this game was the second lowest of this season. So, things are not looking good for the Toronto Raptors already. And then the Raptors would continuously cut the deficit in this game to 10 points. But that was the closest they would get. The Nets just kept getting one timely bucket after another. And they just couldn't find that same success that they had been having in this 15-game stretch. I mean, during this time, they had 121.2 points on average. They shot 50% on average. And in this game, they shot the ball 37.8%. So you kind of just get this feeling that it's just not going to be the Toronto Raptors' night. They end up losing this game 101-91, so Toronto's franchise best win streak stops at 15, and the Bucks' 18-game win streak early on in the year holds as the longest for this season. Lowry after the game had this to say. He said, quote, "We were walking zombies. We didn't play well tonight. Simple as that. We missed shots, we weren't aggressive, and give them credit. They played their butts off, and they beat us. It's only one game, end quote. And I think that last sentence speaks to what this season really means the most. It's only one game. I mean, the Toronto Raptors, they're 40-15 on the year. They're still the defending champion, and they're doing all of this without Kawhi Leonard. A lot of people, including myself, thought there would be a much bigger drop-off in terms of their ability to win games this season. But they're in second place in the East still. They're 6.5 back from the Bucks, 2 games up on the Celtics, who are behind them. So they're in a good position. Yeah, they lost this game, but you can't win them all. And being on a 15-game win streak in of itself is a huge accomplishment. So just to lose this one game, not a big deal. Ibaka in this game, he had 28 points, 9 rebounds. The guy's been playing really well. 1 steal and 2 blocks. I feel like he's kind of found a revitalization during the season. I mean, the way he's been scoring as much as he has, it's very surprising to me. Van Vliet, he had 22 points in this game. Siakam had 16 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists. So that kind of hurts that he didn't score as much as, the Raptors are accustomed to seeing. And Lowry as well only had 12 points in this one, but he did have a quiet triple-double. So he also added 11 boards and 12 assists. On the other side of the court, the Nets, Karis LeVert, who's been playing a lot better as of late, scored 20 points, 7 rebounds, and 4 assists in this one with 4 steals. In his last 5 games, he's averaging 24 points. So he's kind of starting to get back into his rhythm after missing a lot of time with that injured finger. So I think he's finally starting to get back into a rhythm. Joe Harris had 19.6 rebounds, 2 assists. Spencer Dinwiddie had 17 points, 6 rebounds, 9 assists. And then Jarrett Allen had a quiet double-double with 10 points, 13 rebounds. And so now the Nets are on a 2-game win streak. And they've won 7 of their last 10 games. So not bad. They're playing a lot better and kind of securing themselves in the playoff race. They're in 7th right now, 2 games out of that 8th place spot, 6 games back of 6th place. But either way, they're kind of inching their way back towards that, and they don't even have Kyrie right now. So it's a good look for them. Toronto, like I said, not worried. Just 1 game, and they're 40-15, so they're chilling right now. Now looking forward, Zion Williamson is a phenomenal basketball player already, in case you didn't know. The kid posted a career high in his last game against the Red Hot Blazers, so we break it down next.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. We just talked about 2 of the Eastern Conference teams who had the 2 longest win streaks in the NBA. Both lose them within a matter of 2 days. Boston Celtics lost their 7-game win streak against the Houston Rockets, who have James Harden and Russell Westbrook playing at an elite level right now. One of the best duos in the NBA for sure. And then the Toronto Raptors lost their 15-game win streak. That's a franchise record against the Brooklyn Nets. And so the Bucks have still the longest win streak of the season at 18 games. And now looking forward, Zion Williamson, he's a great player already. He's going up against the Blazers, and coming into this one, they won 7 of their last 10 games. Their most recent win against the Miami Heat, which is impressive. So the Blazers have been playing a lot better, and they just beat one of the top teams in the East. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that they have Damian Lillard. Lillard especially has been extremely good, and he's been on fire. Over the last 10 games, he's averaged 42 points. I mean, it's just insane. It's kind of the outpouring of scoring we've seen from James Harden all season, except now Damian Lillard is kind of taking that crown. He'd be going up against rookie sensation Zion Williamson, like I mentioned before, and the Pelicans. And although they wouldn't have Brandon Ingram for the second straight game with an ankle injury, it doesn't matter. The Pelicans are an up-and-coming team and have been climbing their way back into the playoff picture. They're still not necessarily there, but they're getting closer. At this very moment, past the Blazers game, so like at this very moment, they're just 5 games out from a playoff spot behind the Grizzlies and 1 game out of 9th place. And in that 9th place right now, the Portland Trail Blazers. So a little foreshadowing as to who's going to win this game. Portland looked hot early on. They used a 24-3 run in the first to really take control of this game. But then the Pelicans kind of started getting their footing in this one. And then they were down 36-27 at the end of one. But when they started catching their footing, you kind of got the sense that the momentum was going to stay with them. Zion mostly led them in the comeback efforts. He had 17 points in the first half. And the Pelicans, little by little, they clawed at the lead. And the score was 65-63 at halftime in favor of the Blazers. But the fact that they had fought their way back already, being down by 21 points at one point already, was a sign of good things to come for the Pelicans. To fight their way back throughout the entire first half and get 2 points, they're going to take that with them. That gave them all kinds of momentum, and they were going to use that coming out of the locker room in the second half. The Pelicans caught fire. They scored 41 points in the third quarter to balloon their own lead to 21 at one point. And 17 of those points coming from fast breaks. So this team can definitely run with them. I mean, you got Lonzo Ball who can pick out a pass from anywhere. Drew Holiday as well, a pretty good elite passer too. And just athletic players in Zion Williamson and high flyers like Jackson Hayes. They got players that can run. And they're using that to their advantage. The fourth quarter was mostly used as garbage time. And the Pelicans ran away with this one, winning 138-117, which is a very impressive win for them. Like I said, they've been clawing their way up back into this playoff race, and I think they're going to do it. Eventually, they're going to be up with the best teams in the West, and they're going to stir a lot of controversy in there and make a lot of noise, in my opinion. But this one, all the headlines are going to go to Zion Williamson. He's only played 9 games in his career, and it only took those 9 games to break the 30-point mark. In this one, he had 31 points. 9 rebounds, 6 of them being offensive rebounds, by the way, and then 5 assists. All of this happening in just 28 minutes. There's only 4 19-year-olds in NBA history that have ever put up at least 31 points, 9 rebounds, and 5 assists. Kevin Durant, who's one of the most elite scorers that the NBA has ever seen. He's freakishly tall, so of course he's going to grab some boards. LeBron James, the king, the potential greatest of all time. You can argue it yourself. Luka Doncic, who probably will be in that discussion by the end of his career at one point. And now Zion Williamson, who did it in the fewest minutes. So this kid is in fantastic company and is already doing incredible things as a 19-year-old. It's incredible to see. And the fact that he had 9 rebounds and 6 of them were offensive, it just speaks to his athleticism. He's got great reach. He's got incredible bounce where he can just reach over people and not even it be over the back because of how high he jumps and how long he can reach. And he always works so hard underneath the basket to get good position. And even if he doesn't have good position, that athleticism helps him a lot. He was bullying any defender that they threw at him in this game. The main defenders that he saw were Melo and Ariza, and they just could not stop him. And Ariza is a really great defender. Melo might be like steps slower these days, but Ariza is a really good defender. He had a great jab step at one point and acceleration right past Ariza and finished it easy, and that's just one highlight I decided to mention. Melo had this to say after the game. He said, quote, "I don't really think he's comparable to anyone I've seen. Someone who is as powerful as that. who jumps like that, you can tell he's getting better and getting a feel for the game, end quote. Melo's been in the league for a while. He's seen a lot of players, and he doesn't think anyone can be compared to him because this kid is a freak of nature in terms of his athleticism. It's just insane. He's not that tall. I think he's like 6'8". He's pretty heavy set at like 285, but somehow he has so much power to him in terms of his jumping. And so how do you guard someone that's that athletic and that strong? It's tough. He's averaging this year 21 points, 7.7 boards. 7.7 boards and 2.3 assists and almost a steal a game. He's shooting at 57.6 from the field, all in about 27 minutes. And this is only 9 games into his career. So who knows how high the ceiling for this kid is. I mean, if he's doing this in limited minutes, if his minutes continue to get more and more as the season goes on, he's going to be a monster, and he's just getting started. This game and this win marked the Pelicans' 3rd win in a row. They're 6-4 in their last 10. J.J. Redick in this one, he had 20 points. Josh Hart had 17 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists. Drew Holiday, who was the primary defender on Damian Lillard, which I'm mentioning because we'll talk about it later, how well Damian Lillard did, but Drew Holiday was a big reason why Damian Lillard was pretty limited in this game. Drew Holiday, I think, is one of the best defenders in terms of point guards in the league. Very slept on, and I'll talk more about it when I talk about Damian Lillard's stats for the game. But Drew Holiday in this one had 16 points, 4 rebounds, 10 assists, with 2 steals and 2 blocks. So he was getting it done all over the court. Frank Jackson had 13 points, 5 assists, and then Zoe had 9 points and 10 assists. Now on the other side of the ball, the Blazers had Lillard, like I said, limited to just 20 points. And like I said earlier, he's been averaging 42 points. So you can't give all the credit to Drew Holiday, obviously, but he was the main defender on Damian Lillard for the most part. So trying to limit a guy like Damian Lillard, it's tough to do. And Drew Holiday did a pretty good job of that if he held him to just 20 points. He also had 3 turnovers in this game too. So some of that had to be from the fact that, Drew Holiday had 2 steals. McCollum in this game, he had 20 points as well with 3 assists. Melo added 18 points. Whiteside had a nice double-double with 17 points, 14 boards. And then Wenyen Gabriel off the bench had 12 points. Ariza had 7 points in this game, so my theory on this is that he was so exhausted from guarding Zion on the defensive end that he couldn't really get anything going on the offensive end. And the fact that Zion played as well as he did in this game, it raised the question amongst, NBA Twitter. It was blowing up. Can Zion win Rookie of the Year? There's 28 games left for the Pelicans this season. He's only played in 9 so far. The only reason why I don't think so is because Ja Morant has been playing the whole year and has been very consistent. His stats for the year are 17.6 points per game, 3.5 rebounds, and 7 assists. 7 assists, pretty high. And he's also shooting 50% basically from the field. He's a little bit under that. Ja Morant also is leading the Grizzlies, who are 28-26 and are in 8th place in the West right now. So they're in a playoff spot where people didn't expect them to be at all. And they're 8-2 in their last 10 games. All of this due to the fact that they have Ja Morant. I mean, obviously other pieces are working well. Valanciunas is a great center in this league. Jaren Jackson Jr. is coming into his own. Dylan Brooks just got that 3-year contract extension because of how well and how reliable he's been this year. So they have good pieces around them. But a lot of it has to do with the fact that they have Ja Morant. He's the one that makes them go. And so even if Zion does play as well as he had over these next 28 games, I don't think you can give somebody the Rookie of the Year for just playing less than half of the season, especially since Ja Morant's been playing just as good, if not better, throughout the whole season. So for me, I don't think it's enough to be Rookie of the Year. Obviously, he's going to have a fantastic rookie campaign, but can't give him the award just because Ja's been that good this year. The only way I can see Zion maybe edging out Ja is if he knocks him out of a playoff spot. If Pelicans somehow reach up to that 8th place spot and knock out the Grizzlies, maybe that can swing it in Zion Williamson's favor. But that's it. Coming up next, we check in to see how D'Lo's first game went as a Timberwolf. Spoiler alert, it didn't go well. Also, trouble in paradise for Joel Embiid. Find out more right after this.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Isiah. We just talked about how Zion Williamson had a career night, posted up a career-high 31 points, also added 9 boards and 5 assists, all happening in 28 minutes. There's only 4 19-year-olds who have ever put up those kind of numbers. KD, LeBron, Luka Doncic, and now Zion, who did it the fastest and fewest minutes. So he's crazy. He's playing really well. Some people think maybe he can steal the Rookie of the Year from John Morant, but I think it'd be tough to do. I think it would be tough. And now moving forward, we're going to look at D'Lo, who recently got acquired by the Timberwolves from the Golden State Warriors in return for Andrew Wiggins. They got their partnership that they wanted, D'Angelo Russell and Karl Anthony Towns. And in this debut game for him, they're going up against the Raptors, who at this time, we already talked about the Raptors early on, but at this time, they were on a 14-game win streak. So obviously you know by now, if you've been listening to this whole podcast, hopefully you have, that the Raptors go on to be on a 15-game win streak. So kind of know how this one's already going to go. But talking about it anyway, D'Lo and Karl Anthony Towns before the game, they kind of wanted to hype it up, wanted to buy tickets and put them out for free for their fans, which I thought was a really nice touch for them. So they each bought 1,000 tickets and then gave them out for free to get fans hyped, to get them to the game. Also, they're coming off a huge blowout win over the Clippers. Like, what? No one expected that. I mean, how do the Timberwolves, the team that were on a 13-game losing streak, all of a sudden beat the Clippers? A team that's as in third place in the West and has players like Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. Just doesn't make sense. Anyway, if they wanted to follow that up, you know, they'd be playing against this team in the Toronto Raptors. It's a tougher matchup, in my opinion, just because of how well the Raptors have been playing as of late. And so everything would kind of seem okay for the first half. After getting outscored 40-36 in the first, they came back and outscored the Raptors 39-34. In the second to actually have the lead heading into halftime at 75-74. In the third quarter is where it got ugly. Minnesota shot 33% from both the field and from three-point land, so they were struggling shooting the ball. The highest scorer being D'Angelo Russell with only 6 points, so that's rough. On the other hand, Anunoby scored 16, with Hollis Jefferson adding 9 to help the Raptors outscore the Wolves 32-19, and they would take the lead heading into the fourth, 106-94. Minnesota would come closer and get within 108-106 with 9 minutes to go, but that's the closest they would come to mounting a comeback. All of a sudden, Toronto's offense kicked in, and the lead was ballooned up again to 120-109 with 5.5 to go, and from there, Toronto would just hold on for a 137-126 win, winning their 15th in a row, which we already knew, and Minnesota losing their 7th straight road game. Minnesota had a season worst 23 turnovers, leading to 34 gimmies for the Raptors. Luckily for them, the Raptors were pretty careless too with the basketball and turned it over 20 times for Minnesota to score 26 points, but either way, having a season worst 23 turnovers in a debut for D'Angelo Russell is probably not the way they saw this going. Toronto is 15-0 when shooting over 50% or better. Also, in this game, their starters combined for 123 points, just from their starters. That's a new team record. And Anunoby had a career-high 25 points, and he tied his career-high for rebounds with 12 on 10 of 13 shooting, and also had 3 steals. So he was doing it all. Played probably his best basketball game of his career. First time he's ever had a 20-point and 10-rebound game. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that Siakam said sometimes he gets in his head when he plays too much, and when he just plays carefree, he plays a lot better, and he marked it up to that for the reason why he played well. Siakam himself had a great game. 34 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals, and a block. So that's the kind of numbers you would normally expect from Siakam. Lowry had a great night too. A double-double, had 27 points, 7 rebounds, 11 assists. But he did have 8 turnovers, which definitely hurts. Not something you want to see from your point guard. I mean, that's kind of where a lot of the turnovers came from. Like I said, Toronto had 20 in this game. 8 of them coming from just Kyle Lowry. Rough. Hollis Jefferson added 21 points, had 6 rebounds. Van Vliet had 16 points, 2 rebounds, and 7 assists with 3 steals. For the Timberwolves, though, things were not as pretty. Karl-Anthony Towns had a double-double. He had 23 points, 10 rebounds, 7 assists. D'Angelo Russell had 22 points and 5 assists. You'd think this is decent, not a bad stat line. 22 points, pretty respectable. 5 assists, something you want to see from your point guard. But he turned the ball over 6 times, which is rough. And he had a plus-minus of negative 22. That's the worst of all players for Minnesota. A minus 22 when you're on the court, that's not the impact you want to have when you're first going to a new franchise. So that's not the debut they were looking for at all. Rough go, especially against this Raptors team. Obviously, it's going to be a tough game already. And when your new star player is playing that poorly, it's rough. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that D'Lo doesn't play defense, which is another reason why the Warriors got rid of him. Hernan Gomez, Beasley, and Culver all had 15 points in this game. Tough go for D'Angelo Russell, but he's not the only one that's had it rough lately. Joel Embiid, he's being constantly booed by Sixer fans for whatever reason. They have like a love-hate relationship with each other, and I think it's hilarious because Joel Embiid almost likes it. He shushed them twice in his game Sunday against the Chicago Bulls, and then he posted a picture on Monday of him shushing the crowd, and it was captioned, "You either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain." So I don't know if any of you are a DC fan, but that's definitely from The Dark Knight. I saw an article actually written by ESPN of somebody who was writing about it and said, I don't know, maybe he's just a big Marvel fan. And I don't know if any of you guys are like comic nerds, but that triggered me. It definitely annoyed me. Do your research. But yeah, quoting The Dark Knight, he said, maybe he's the villain now and he's got to love that role and embrace that role. And what made it even more controversial is the fact that Jimmy Butler responded. He responded by saying, "I know where villains are welcomed." And Joel Embiid liked the comment, replied to it as well. So it kind of looked like Jimmy Butler was out here recruiting, trying to bring Joel Embiid to South Beach, which would be interesting to see, for sure. He put his location as being all love regarding his city and, who have a great back and forth with him, like I said. So he loves controversy. And for whatever reason, when he has this much controversy surrounding him, he plays better. And so following that post and following all that controversy surrounding him, he did get booed by the Sixers fans in his introduction. But then the Sixers ended up beating the Clippers 110-103. And he had 26 points and 9 boards and completely shut down Montrezl Harrell, who only had 10 points in this one. He also had a shoving contest with Marcus Morris, which I thought was hilarious because it was like such a pointless interaction between the two of them. I mean, Joel Embiid kind of was just like holding his arm, Marcus Morris's arm, and so Morris like pushed him off, and then Joel Embiid kind of like pushed him a little bit, and then Morris shoved Embiid pretty far. That's a tough dude. I would not want to mess with him. But like I said, Joel Embiid just loves being the bad guy, and I don't know why that is. That's just his mentality. He loves being the good, expletive that he uses. But yeah, he loves it. I mean, it's a love-hate relationship with the city, he says. And he said, sometimes they're going to love me, sometimes they're going to hate me, and that's just the way it's got to be. And usually he's strayed away from going on social media this season a lot, trying to get rid of those off-court antics that he had in the previous seasons. But he feels like he plays better when he stirs up the pot and stirs controversy. So clearly he's going back to that. He thinks maybe this will help him play better. I mean, if he's putting up numbers like that and beating a team like the Clippers, I don't think the fans are going to continue booing him for much longer, at least not for now. That's just how it goes for the Sixers, though. They go back and forth on this guy. But yeah, coming up next, we got some unfortunate news for Damian Lillard, but it could mean some good news for Devin Booker. So we'll be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. We just talked about D'Angelo Russell's debut game for the Minnesota Timberwolves, and it did not go according to plan. They were playing against the Toronto Raptors, who at the time were on a 14-game win streak, end up extending that win streak to 15 games, and D'Angelo Russell posted a minus 22, so that's not the impact he wanted. We also talked about Joel Embiid being the villain for Philadelphia. The fans either love him or they hate him. There's no in between. And sometimes he gets booed. He posted on social media saying he might become the villain. And Jimmy Butler responded, maybe recruiting him to South Beach. But looking forward now, Portland up against Memphis, two great teams in the West, two teams fighting for that last playoff spot in the 8th place right now. So Portland goes from playing one good rookie to the next rookie in terms of Zion Williamson and now John Morant. They're coming off that loss to the Pelicans, but they could potentially lose so much more in this game. Kind of foreshadowing this one. Grizzlies are ahead of them in the standings, and they have the last playoff spot. So it's just a big game for the Blazers if they want to continue to cut that deficit and get back into the playoff picture. Memphis would take a 4-point lead in this game heading into halftime, and then they would continue to grow it to double digits. Portland, who were on a back-to-back in terms of their games and also had 6 games in 7 days, probably gassed out. The Grizzlies end up taking this game 111-104. It's a tough blow for the Portland Trail Blazers, especially since they were riding pretty high. Now they're on a 2-game losing streak. and they're still 4 games out of a playoff spot. So not exactly the way they wanted to go into the All-Star break, but All-Star break couldn't have come at a better time for them because Damian Lillard ends up straining his left groin. He said later on it didn't make sense for him to keep playing because he didn't want to further injure it, which makes sense because if you're hurting, why would you try and keep playing? Makes no sense. He also said because of this new injury that he has just gotten, he will not be playing All-Star Weekend. So it's a little bittersweet for him because obviously you like being part of the festivities. You like to have a good time and just kind of lay back, play basketball in a less competitive environment and just enjoy the festivities that All-Star Weekend bring. So obviously it sucks that he won't be able to participate now. But at the same time, it's a blessing in disguise for him because if he gets his injury, now that All-Star break is happening, he gets a good 8-day window or so where he can rest up and get back to full strength. So he'll be better over time. I think it's good for him. He also, in his interview, when they were asking him, does this mean you're not going to play anymore? He said, no, I won't. Hopefully it opens up a spot for a guy like Devin Booker. He actually named him Devin Booker. And so it goes back to what we talked about before, that he kind of got robbed. I think in a lot of ways, the open spot should for sure go to Devin Booker, the way that he's been playing this season, because he's playing phenomenal. The Phoenix Suns, they're not that great this year. They're low. They're low on the Western Conference standings right now, but the only reason why they win as many games as they do is because of Devin Booker and his ability to just score. And in a lot of ways, he carries that Phoenix team. And so initially, even before Damian Lillard gets hurt, you would think that he should deserve to be in this All-Star weekend. I mean, if you look at his numbers, he's played 52 games this season. He's averaging 26.4 points, has 4.2 rebounds, and 6.3 assists on 49.6% shooting. I mean, he's getting it done. And he's playing extremely well this season. And the fact that he hasn't been an All-Star yet is baffling to me because I don't understand it. He's just such a great elite player in this league. And speaking of All-Star break, there's also a suggestion I saw on Twitter made by fans mostly and kind of put together by Bleacher Report of a 1v1 tourney being part of All-Star break. I think that would be a really interesting thing to see. And so, like I said, Bleacher Report put some scenarios together of how that would look. They put some matchups they thought would be interesting to see. In the first round, it's LeBron versus Ingram. I think it's fairly obvious who would win this round. I mean, LeBron James' size would be too much for Ingram. I don't think he'd be able to body him as physically as much as Bron would just bully Ingram. Ingram would have some pretty good offense, I think, would get some buckets, but I don't think he'd be able to stop LeBron on the flip side. So for me, LeBron takes that one. Another game in the first round was Harden versus Damian Lillard. I think this one is a little more interesting. Both of them are both elite scorers. We talked about them earlier in the podcast about how Damian Lillard has been scoring at a tremendous rate in his last few games, and James Harden has been doing it all season long. So for me, this one would be really close, but the reason I'm going to give it to Damian Lillard is because I think Dame would play just a little bit better defense. Also, I think he's a little more physical than James Harden is. So I'm going to give this round to Damian Lillard. On the other side of the bracket, they had Kawhi versus Russell Westbrook. That could be a very interesting matchup because Kawhi does have the all-around tools to be a better player than Russell Westbrook. But then on the flip side, Russell Westbrook has an unparalleled work rate. That guy is a freak athlete. He's crazy fast. He can jump super high. I mean, he's just a crazy athlete. So I feel like he might be able to do a pretty good job if he's just 1v1 against Kawhi in terms of locking him up. But Kawhi does have a lot of offensive tools, and he's definitely a better defender than Russell Westbrook. So for me, I think Kawhi would definitely beat Russell Westbrook in a 1v1, so I'm going to give it to him. And then the last matchup in the first round was Giannis versus Luka Doncic. And as much as I love Luka, you got to give it to Giannis because he's just that much bigger than Luka. His length is way too much. Luka has so many tools offensively, but Giannis's athleticism and his length would just lock up Luka. I think it would be tremendously tough for Luka to get consistent buckets against him. And as good as Luka is on the offensive end, he's not as proficient on the defensive end. So trying to lock up Giannis, of all people, wouldn't happen. So Giannis wins that round. In the second round, they matched up LeBron versus Damian Lillard. Kind of the same deal as Giannis versus Luka. It's just unfair. I think LeBron would completely bully Damian Lillard. And maybe Lillard would get a few points here and there, but because of the size difference and LeBron still being athletic enough to keep up with point guards, I think LeBron would shut him down. And then on the flip side, there's no way Damian Lillard's going to hold LeBron off. If he wants to go drive to the basket, he'll just back him in and then dunk on him. That's all it takes. So LeBron wins that round. On the flip side, though, Kawhi Leonard versus Giannis Antetokounmpo, that would be a crazy, crazy 1v1. Because in a lot of ways, those two are very similar. Giannis has the size in terms of physicality and length, but Kawhi Leonard's no scrub. He's got a lot of length to him as well. And so I think that one's definitely a toss-up for me. But I think, in my opinion, I would give it to Kawhi just because I feel like he has a little more offensive tools than Giannis does. He can take it farther outside. He can fade away a little bit better than Giannis can. Giannis has a lot of good post moves, but Kawhi is one of the most elite defenders in the league. So I feel like, in my opinion, Kawhi would win this one, but they gave it to Giannis. And now in this final matchup, it would be LeBron versus Giannis Antetokounmpo if we're going based off of this. And I think that would be a crazy matchup too. And I don't even know who I would go with between these two because both of them are extremely similar. I think LeBron has a little more range in terms of his shooting ability. I think Giannis is probably a little bit better of a defender. And they're both extremely physical. So it would be a total bloodbath. It would be a very close and competitive contest. But if I had to choose one, I'm probably going with LeBron. Just because of his experience, his ability to guard 1 through 5. He would definitely try and lock up Giannis. I don't think Giannis has as many offensive tools as LeBron does. So if that was the final matchup of this 1v1 tourney for All-Star break, I feel like LeBron would take over and beat Giannis in this matchup. That's definitely not going to happen anytime soon. I don't see that being added to All-Star Weekend, but it's just a fun thing to kind of look at and see and predict, just what you think, how it would go. And speaking of predictions, segueing into our last segment of the night, we're going to talk about some of the two last games before All-Star Weekend. I'm going to give predictions on those. I'm also going to give some predictions on All-Star Weekend in terms of the games, the Rising Star Game, the All-Star Game, and some of the festivities in terms of the three-point contest and the dunk contest. So stay with us.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. We just talked about how Damian Lillard, unfortunately, has gone down with a groin injury. Hopefully, it's nothing too serious. So in which case, he's not going to be able to attend All-Star weekend. He's not going to partake anymore. So now there's an open All-Star spot. Who else should it go to other than Devin Booker? I think it's definitely should be Devin Booker's spot. I mean, the way that he's been playing this year, 26.4 points, 4.2 rebounds, 6.3 assists, and leading the Phoenix Suns. Even though they're not that good in the Western Conference, it shouldn't be based off of team success. So his individual stats definitely put him up there, for sure. I mean, he's having a career year. So the fact that he hasn't been an All-Star yet is baffling. And I think this is finally his moment to get in, even though it is just because of an injury. And now looking forward, we're going to do some predictions over the next few games happening before All-Star break. We see the Clippers versus the Celtics. Both of these teams coming off of losses. The Clippers right now, they just lost their game. They're 6-4 in their last 10. The Celtics just lost a game too. They're 8-2 in their last 10. They were on a 7-game win streak. So both of these teams, I feel like, need a bounce back win. But if I had to go with one team, I'm going to go with the Boston Celtics, just because I feel like they've shown a lot more consistency this year. They're both tied, though, in terms of how many games they've won. It's just that the Celtics have lost one less game than the Clippers have. But for me, I don't think the Clippers have been consistent enough for me to want to go with them in terms of this prediction. They do have a lot of good players and have a lot of good potential, but right now I don't think that's their main focus. I feel like both these teams are just going to want to get through it and get to All-Star weekend. But the fact that Jason Tatum had such a poor game last time, and Kemba Walker also had a really poor game last game, I don't think that'll happen again. Those are your two leading scorers for the Boston Celtics. And if Gordon Hayward can continue to score 20 points consistently, along with Jaylen Brown as well, I don't see the Clippers being able to match them offensively. I mean, Lou Williams, he'll go out and he'll ball out like he does. Paul George, he'll get a good amount of points too, but I don't know. I just feel like the Celtics have a lot more pieces to them to be more successful and win this game. Plus, the Clippers just lost to the 76ers. And if you match up the Celtics and the 76ers, the Celtics most recently lost to the Sixers, but they have, like I said, a lot more pieces that could make them more successful in this matchup. So I'm going to go with the Boston Celtics in this one. The other game right before All-Star Weekend is the Thunder versus the Pelicans. And to me, this is a little more interesting because both of these teams are wild cards, in my opinion. The Thunder are a team that have been playing really well this year, but they're on a 2-game losing streak right now. No one really expected them to be as good as they are, but they just have been putting together a lot of good games, mostly because of the revitalization of Chris Paul. He's been playing great this year. But yeah, they're on a 2-game skid right now. On the other hand, the Pelicans are on a 3-game win streak, and Zion Williamson just had a career night. They're probably going to get Brandon Ingram back. If they don't, then they probably won't win this game. But if they do, I think I'm going to go with the Pelicans. Either way, I'm going with the Pelicans, actually, because this is the team I've been going with for the predictions all year long, and I think they're going to continue their win streak and continue climbing up the Western Conference table. I think Zion Williamson is going to have a great game in this one. I mean, who's going to guard Zion Williamson on the Thunder? It's going to be tough. And he's going to be going up against probably Steven Adams at times, probably Gallinari at times. And to me, he wins both of those matchups. I mean, Steven Adams has him on size, of course, but his quickness will get him around Steven Adams. And then Gallinari, he can maybe body up against Zion, but I don't think he's athletic enough to keep up with Zion either. So I think Zion's going to have a great night. Drew Holiday is going to be very effective against Chris Paul in terms of shutting him down. So Chris Paul won't be able to run his offense as cleanly as he wants to usually. I think Zoe's going to have a very productive night. Probably going to get over 10 assists like he usually does. So I have the Pelicans beating the Thunder in this matchup. And now looking forward to All-Star Weekend, there's a lot of stuff going on. For example, the Rising Stars game. Obviously, it's Team USA versus Team World. And for me, I got to go with Team USA. I mean, just looking at their roster, John Morant, Colin Sexton, who is almost averaging 20 points. I don't know if people knew that. I mean, I know that the Cavs are terrible. They're 14-40, last in the Eastern Conference, but Sexton is a bright spot for them. He's been playing pretty well. He's having a breakout year. Devontae Graham also having a breakout year. I mean, obviously, Charlotte Hornets have not been very good either, 18-36, but Devontae Graham's having a pretty breakout year. I think he's probably going to move in the summer. Those are three great players right there. Eric Pascal, another player on a poor team, but playing really well. He was in that Rookie of the Year conversation early on in the season. Kind of burned out a little bit because he obviously wasn't expecting to play this many games and this many minutes, but he has a lot of tools to be a really great player in this league. Jaren Jackson Jr., who's having a great year alongside John Morant. Those two are a crazy tandem. They're on the same team on this Rising Stars game, so that's going to be a great pairing. Kendrick Nunn playing fantastic as well for the Miami Heat, really helping them along, as well as Tyler Hero, who's just a flamethrower from three-point land. Then you have Trae Young if he plays. I don't know if he would play because he's playing in the All-Star game, but if he does play, that's just another person to name. And then Zion Williamson. I mean, this team rounded out has way too much talent, I think, for Team World to even try and compete with. So I think that the Rising Stars game, Team USA wins this game by at least 10 points. For sure. Moving on, three-point contest. My favorite festivity of All-Star Weekend to watch. It's just so interesting to see. Damian Lillard was supposed to be in this one, but I don't think he'll do it. If he's not going to play in the All-Star game, he probably won't do the three-point contest. Doesn't want to further any injuries, so he's out of that. I think it'll be between Buddy Hield, who is averaging 38.7% from three-point land. He's also the fastest player to get to 800 threes, I think it was. He eclipsed Stephen Curry for the fastest person to do it. And he scores threes at an enormous rate, especially for the Sacramento Kings. Playing really well this season, and so I think he'll have a pretty good contest. Robinson from, I think, the Heat, he averages 43.7 points, or 43.7% from three, and then Bertans is 42.5% from three. So between those three, I think that'll be the championship round. I'm going to go with Robinson just because I've seen him most recently play against the Golden State Warriors for the Miami Heat, and that guy hits threes at an enormous rate. He's just incredibly skilled. But the rest of the players obviously are no scrubs either. You got Graham, who's shooting 37.7%. Levine, which I thought was kind of interesting. I didn't know that he was such a great three-point shooter, but he's 38.5%. Harris has 40.8% from three, and then Trae Young also in this as well, 37%. And I think Trae Young is a great three-point shooter, but what makes Trae Young so impressive to me is his range, and so the range doesn't really matter in this three-point competition. For me, I think it's going to be Robinson. I think he's going to hold on to it. Buddy Hield has the most experience between the three that I was rooting for to begin with, so I think maybe experience could help him edge out them, but I think Robinson will take it for sure. The dunk contest is another really cool event to see, and it's really, really cool to see that Superman is back, Dwight Howard. It'll be interesting to see if he could still be as creative with his dunks late in his career. Derek Jones will be a really nice person, or a nice contestant in this contest. But I want to see Aaron Gordon win it. I mean, I think it's about time. He got absolutely robbed against his matchup against Zach LaVine, in my opinion. I think he just had the better dunks. I mean, some of those dunks were crazy, gravity-defying. I mean, he put his entire legs over a mascot, put the ball underneath, and then dunked it. I mean, he's insane. That dunk contest, he got robbed. So I think he deserves it. He's deserved it for a while. And this is the year he's going to win it. And now, finally, All-Star Weekend is not All-Star Weekend without the All-Star Game. Team LeBron versus Team Giannis Antetokounmpo. And for me, it's Team Giannis, not Team Giannis. What am I saying? It's Team LeBron by a landslide. It's not even going to be close. Obviously, with the new All-Star Game setup, you start at 0 at the beginning of each quarter, and then you add the cumulative score from those first three quarters, add 24, and then get to that. Team LeBron is going to be the one that sets the final score because they're going to be in the lead cumulatively. I think they'll probably be up by like 10, 12 by that point, and then they're going to ride it out and win the game. I mean, LeBron's team is just leaps and bounds better than Giannis is, in my opinion. And even though he loses Damian Lillard, you're plugging in Devin Booker in there, a person who's going to get his first All-Star appearance. So he's going to be that much more excited and that much more eager to prove himself in this game. LeBron's also got Anthony Davis, his running mate, one of the scariest duos in the league. Got Luka Doncic, who's, second, in my opinion, MVP race. You got Kawhi Leonard, who's an all-around just beast. James Harden, who scores at will. Ben Simmons can run offense pretty well. He'll give you a lot of assists. Jokic is very versatile, and then the list goes on and on and on. Whereas Giannis has Joel Embiid, who he's the bad guy. Cool. Pascal Siakam, he's, a player that's gotten a lot better over time, but he's nowhere near as good as Kawhi Leonard or Anthony Davis. Kemba Walker, I love Kemba. I love Kemba Walker, but he's not better than Luka Doncic, especially not this season. Trae Young, he's a great player too, but if you're going to compare him and James Harden in terms of scoring, James Harden's proved that this season he can't be messed with. Chris Middleton was where Giannis messed up, in my opinion. I mean, loyalty, respect, I get it. But you could have gotten a lot better players. Bam, for me, could be an X factor and a game changer just because he's crazy athletic and just super aggressive. And he's having a great career year. He's really figured out the league and figured out how to be successful. So he could be the X factor. But for me, I think that the MVP of this All-Star game is going to be Anthony Davis. He's going to completely go off. Team LeBron's going to win by a landslide. So those are my predictions. And that's going to do it for this podcast. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review because that really helps us out. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, I would greatly appreciate that. I'm Isiah Quiroz. Thank you guys, and see you next time.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.